President Cyril Ramaphosa has told leaders in Gauteng that residents must actually experience service delivery rather than merely having it enshrined in the Constitution. He was delivering the opening address at a meeting with the province's leadership and members of his cabinet on day one of a two-day oversight visit. Public policy analyst Dr TK Pooe of the Wits School of Governance joins us now to talk about more. Just reading that statement, Dr. Pooe, doesn't sit well with me, because if government ministers, MECs, premiers, mayors, councillors really took their mandate seriously, took their jobs seriously, that's not something that even ought to be said. Very good afternoon to you.
No, afternoon, Rebu, and thanks for opening that. I think you kind of sum it up quite well, that it's a bit surprising, because if I'm not mistaken, the president actually stays in Johannesburg and he has to leave the city of Joburg to go past to the city of Tshwane to go to the union buildings, and many ministers sometimes and MECs do the same. So it does almost reinforce this old idea, which says that we have an elite which is detached from the real society of South Africa. Hence, maybe issues of security, tax don't really matter to them, because they live in very beautiful bubbles, which our taxpayers' money has to pay for. So it's a bit. I think it doesn't quite make sense that a president visits a province that he lives in, and he visits a city that he lives in, to pronounce on things many citizens have been saying for the longest of time.
And it does indeed, call into question both the value and purpose of these oversight visits, or izimbizos as they were once called, doesn't it?
It does. I think one of the spokespersons said that, I think he was on your show earlier on, said it's a visit with a difference. But then from a policy lens, we have the Intergovernmental Relations Act, I think 2005, which specifies that, listen, this is how a cooperative three-tier system of government is supposed to work. So everything is supposed to go according to the letter of the law, in terms of this is how the municipality reports to the province and so forth. So it does really become surprising that you need a visit to really make this occur. It really raises the question, what's the point in paying officials and politicians all this money if visits are what constitutes oversight? And I think we've got the government has had a very poor understanding of oversight for the last decade or so, because oversight is not simply you visiting. An oversight is you saying beforehand, what do the finances look like? You go to the problem knowing what the problem is, and then you actually make a strategic intervention. A visit, for me, just seems like a photo opportunity, nothing more.
Beyond the spin, really, what should President Cyril Ramaphosa be telling, or what should he have told that meeting of the leadership of Gauteng?
Well, I think the president should not have said anything. I think he should have just instituted a Section 139, point 5, where he makes a strategic intervention in the municipality, in the same way we've seen with the city of eThekwini, where the president has actually set up a council to say, listen, this is an emergency, let's fix this municipality up. That's what we should be saying for many municipalities in Gauteng. And I'll also even echo my home municipality of Emfuleni, which is an absolute disaster. So the president shouldn't be saying anything. What we should be saying is a proper constitutional Section 39. We should actually be saying more than a Section 139, which I think sometimes they do, but there's never a lot of follow through beyond simply saying, listen, we're putting people in there. We should be saying, how do you get experts in there? The city of Joburg is the crown of the economy of South Africa, and Gauteng is the same. We should be getting the leading minds, the policy minds, the business minds to say, listen, where has this province gone wrong? Where's the city gone wrong? And let's quickly make an intervention, because at the way things are currently going at the moment, the city of Joburg is going to be a ghost city, and it's going to mirror the CBD, which is an absolute disaster, as everyone will know.
Well, according to the provincial government's spin, Dr. Vuyomaga, one of the big questions is, how do we get support from the nation to work with us?
And I never quite understand that question. You have when you were campaigning, that's not the language that we're using. When they're campaigning, they said we have plan A and B. Citizens are tired of always, it's almost as though when the political elites and the political leadership, especially within failed municipalities and also where Gauteng is heading, that the last resort is to say, well, let's sort of bring in citizens. Well, even if you bring in citizens, citizens aren't the ones who are voting on budgets. Citizens aren't the ones who are unable to, say, listen, infrastructure delays are caused by X and Y. Let's find the right solutions. It's almost as though, and one doesn't mean to be rude in saying that, is they have exhausted their ability to lead. And maybe what they are asking for in the coming up elections is for them to be relieved of the ability to be leadership. Leadership does not ask when things are going wrong, oh, let's call a meeting. Leadership acts. And I think that's been the missing thing in South Africa's political elite. This is not just unique to Gauteng and the city of Joburg and places like Mfuleni and the city of Tshwane. This is unique across many South African cities, that we simply don't have the right and qualified leadership who want to lead this country or who want to say, listen, this is a vision that's implemented. Citizens are very forgiving. I mean, we've been doing it for 3 decades or so with the messes of the African National Congress. But what they're becoming unforgiving about is when people simply start doing photo opportunities and, like you say, spin doctoring. People want action. If you can't do that, just step aside.
Well, the provincial government is convinced that it's got its ducks in a row, so to speak, on economic transformation and job creation, township economy and empowerment, infrastructure investment, collaboration across municipalities, regional economic regeneration, public transport and energy initiatives, as articulated by the Premier in his recent State of the Province address.
Well, that doesn't quite square up with the facts if you look at what Stats SA has said, especially about the province. And this is why I'm not a fan of State of the Nations or State of the Provinces, because I think they've actually lost what they're supposed to be set up to be, which is about, listen, this is what we promised in year X, this is what we've delivered now. And you just have to look at what Stats SA says routinely about the state of the province and where things are going. The economy is not moving. I know there was celebrations which didn't make sense about celebrating 0.6, because if you had to round it off, it's still 0 about where we're going. But I think this is not true. If anything, and the Premier, and I know the Premier does seem to mean well in terms of how he wants to lead the province. But if the Premier was serious about these things, he simply would say, listen, let's institute a lot of these Sections 139s. Let's actually get the specialists into local government. Let's actually quicken infrastructure investment. Let's not have talk shops. Everybody knows what's wrong with Gauteng. You don't need a PhD for this. But it would seem as though the action that's supposed to follow it, and some of the decisions which have been made, it's almost as though they make things worse. So I think the celebration of where Gauteng is quite false. And if in reality, citizens have told you, even using the last elections, many citizens of Gauteng are basically disheartened with not just the ANC, by the way, but I think many of the political elites that find themselves in the Gauteng provincial legislature.
Well, I mean, on the back of everything you've said, I don't know whether this one makes a difference. Apparently, the president, during his meeting with the provincial leadership, lambasted them for Gauteng and as a province, but also Johannesburg, the city, for the poor state of Johannesburg during the recent meetings of G20 foreign ministers and other meetings that have been held, which in turn led to an apology being issued by the provincial premier, Panyaza Lesufi. I don't know if that makes a difference.
I think it's problematic because what it's simply saying is, in the absence of the G20, would the president have been upset? Because many other citizens who are paying their rates and taxes, and if you know anything about living in Gauteng, it is quite expensive. That's almost like a slap in the face. It's saying that we only act because we're going to have foreign guests coming over. What about citizens who monthly have to fork out money? And look, we're in a tight economy. Where's the apology for those citizens who have to go through potholes where, and I always say this, the height of when you know Gauteng is not working is on a regular, whichever area you go to within the city of Joburg or even other parts of Gauteng, when you have people who are not traffic officers, having to direct traffic because the lights are not working or the traffic officers are sometimes just sitting there, you sort of see where things are going. And it really does say there is no good story to tell. So I think what the president says is more alarming and more than comforting. And I think if I were was his not his spokesperson, but necessarily his speechwriter, I would not have really echoed such a thing, because it doesn't really make sense. Because you're simply saying, if you're a regular citizen of the city of Joburg, it doesn't matter. We only matter because we've got this G20 coming up. If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't really be going off at them. He should have been going off at the city of Joburg and Gauteng over the last, I'd say the last decade or so, where things have been in steep decline.
I mean, he has had, public meetings, in Bezos, where he would address communities, and communities would come up with their demands, their needs, and all of that. And ministers would all be there together with the president, premiers, mayors, everybody. And promises would be made, and everyone gets surprised later when these communities then take to the streets, close roads, even attack. Not that that has to be condoned, but they start attacking public infrastructure in the form of schools, libraries, and the like. So it doesn't seem to matter whether these meetings are happening between and within and among government leaders, or these leaders get to interact with communities. The outcome seems to be pretty much the same.
And I think that's a sad thing about it. I think it was an article or work by the HSRC a few years ago. The paper was titled, "When There Is Smoke, There Will Come," and which was basically speaking to the fact that the only way residents seem to get any reaction from government is if they either burn things or do things. Obviously, we don't condemn such behavior, but I think it is a sign of a broken governance system. And if the president does want to leave a legacy behind, if I were him, I'd start to say, listen, how do you actually use Gauteng, which is small enough, complex, but small enough for you to actually put strategic interventions to quicken infrastructure development and the like. I always say this, I don't think hope is all lost, because I always say once we put in the right people, once we actually minimize the many dreams we have and have actual strategies, Gauteng and places like the city of Joburg and even my home municipality of Mfuleni can be turned around. So our issue are not so gigantic that they can't be turned around. It's just that we need the right and relevant leadership to really be to put in the right thing. So I don't think we should lose total hope, Revuyo, but I do think time is running out and we need to have actual leadership and actual experts to lead the process. Is not what we currently have, unfortunately.
Agree with you. We simply cannot afford to lose hope, but something has to give. TK Pooe, thank you very much for your time and insights. It's from the Wits School of Governance. Really appreciate